Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from the Singapore FinTech Festival, and joining me for this segment, we have Michael Abbott, Senior Managing Director and Global Banking Lead at Accenture. We're here to discuss Gen AI and the future of banking, stages of adoption, and challenges to overcome. Michael, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Great to be here, Jill.
Let's talk about Gen AI and the future of banking. Where are banks headed in their efforts to adopt Gen AI, and what do you think, what stages are they at in terms of adoption?
Yeah, we kind of look at this as like a three-stage approach. First is kind of basic use cases that people are doing right now, and then I think what they're moving towards very quickly is what I would describe as agentic workflows, kind of like job specs using Gen AI to be able to drive decision process, et cetera. And then the third horizon of this is what I would describe as truly your own customized large language model that can act like your own digital brain. But if you ask me, most banks are still in stage 0. They're just getting started on this front.
Yeah, what about the particular functions where Gen AI can be especially useful for banks?
You know, we see right now in this role globally, I think we see like 300-400 projects going on, and I would say probably right now the single most disruptive thing Gen AI is doing is around programming. And believe it or not, one of the very interesting things is if you look at banks, the vast majority of the core of banks are still based on legacy COBOL code from 30, 40 years ago. And what we're seeing Gen AI can act almost like a Rosetta Stone to decode those ancient hieroglyphics and turn it into modern specifications and languages. And that's been perhaps maybe one of the greatest, I'd say, short near-term breakthroughs that we've seen with it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the customers demand it now too. I mean, they understand what Gen AI is. If it was November 2022 when it became part of the consumer vernacular, and here we are, 2 years later, it's almost an expectation of the customer, and of course, there's consumer demand, the products they will build.
Yeah, and I do think to along those fronts, what you're also seeing is the most disruptive is in the core and what we're doing, what you're seeing people do there. But the most interesting is also what's occurring from an experience point of view, where the ability to have truly conversational engines. So imagine, I would say that if you look at the last 25 years of digital, every bank has solved digital. Every bank operating around the world is rated a 4.8 or 4.9. But in doing that, they become a sea of sameness, right? We all see the same thing. And what's happened is we become functionally correct and emotionally devoid. We can check our balances, pay our bills in our mobile app, but we don't have a conversation anymore like we're having here.
Right.
Gen AI holds the potential to put humanity back in the banking, to basically make it feel like you're dealing with your branch manager 30 years ago, but on your mobile phone.
Yeah.
Right? That's the real promise that's out there.
Do you think there's still a Cold War of sorts between, let's call it the banks and the tech firms or the startups, basically TradFi versus DeFi? Or are you starting to see that melt a bit and there's more of an integration, more of an open conversation around that?
I think we've definitely seen a melting of the iceberg there. And in fact, in many ways, what we've seen is the fintech players become partners increasingly with more and more with the banks versus trying to be disruptors. Because if you look at this, and it's an interesting point, because everyone thinks Gen AI, everyone predicted digital was going to completely change banking, right? We just looked at this, and we look back after 25 years of digital disruption, 1999 being the height of the dot-com boom. It's a quarter of a century now of digital. Name one bank that's the equivalent of Amazon, Google, or Facebook that's completely broken through and destroyed and built a new banking system. The answer is there's none, because it's durable. So I think what the fintechs have realized is that banking in itself is about assets, balance sheet, and scale. And it's the marriage of the two that's going to provide the power. You need both sides of that equation to work.
Right, like so the nimble of the startups, the fintechs, with the scalability of the incumbent players versus like this ethos of us versus them.
It's the best of digital and the best of the balance sheet brought together. I think that's the winning equation out there.
All right, Michael, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. And thanks for joining me from the Singapore FinTech Festival. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.